To discuss all of this, let's bring in Emira Woods. She's an associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington. Emira, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Emira, South Africa's economy is in big trouble. How much of this is linked to the commodity slump and the growth slowdown in China?
Well, I think we have to look around the world, not just in South Africa or even the African continent, and see the impact of the downturn, both in consumer spending and in commodity price declines. Really, it's having its impact in South Africa, throughout Africa, and throughout the world.
Well, it's certainly having a big impact on South Africa, very dependent on commodities and very dependent on its mining industry. That's taken a knock not only by the commodity slump, but also by massive power cuts. In fact, all the businesses in the country are being hampered by these power cuts. There are regular blackouts, once a week at least. Emira, what can be done about this? Why is the country's utility provider, Eskom, just not keeping up?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons behind that. Many would say it goes back to privatization, a key underpinning of a macroeconomic policy in South Africa since 1994 that has essentially sold off key industries like the power sector. And so what you have had really is a privileging of a very few, and you see that playing out time after time again throughout the South African economy. It is almost like an elite or a small slice of the private sector is being privileged at the expense of workers, at the expense of the majority of the people in the country. This is the problem.
And Emira, speaking of the elite privileged few, there's tremendous misuse of public funds. The most blatant example is the recent Nkandla scandal. Officials used taxpayers' money to renovate President Zuma's private country home. How is South Africa addressing this blatant public misuse issue and the overall issue of corruption?
Well, I think what you see since 1994, the end of apartheid, is a South African economy that's really working in the interest of the very few, a very narrow elite. And so when you see things like this most recent case of corruption, it is part of a fabric of an economy that is not serving the needs of the workers, not serving the needs of the people who fought for political liberation from apartheid, but really have not seen economic liberation. And so, yes, it's horrendous when you imagine that a president would be renovating, under the guise of improving security, but really putting in place a pool costing millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, when you see the increases in food costs, the increases in unemployment, when you see the condition of lives of people, whether it's workers or students, becoming even more untenable. It is unconscionable, really, that the decisions of the economy are being made in such a skewed manner.
And Emira, it was in fact the ANC, the African National Congress, that brought South Africa, helped to bring South Africa out of apartheid. And now many blame the economic demise on the very same party, the ANC, particularly, as you mentioned, President Jacob Zuma. He recently replaced the finance minister 3 times in the space of a week. Now we mentioned there are allegations that that whole decision was influenced by the very wealthy Gupta family. Many are calling for bringing Zuma down. Do you think that replacing him would bolster investor confidence?
Well, it's not an issue of regime change. It's an issue of changing the economy. The economy must work in the interest of workers, in the interest of the majority of people who are young people born after 1994, these born frees that didn't really know the condition of life before the end of apartheid, but clearly had hopes that at the fall of apartheid, that the basic services, whether it's education, healthcare, housing, jobs, that those building blocks of healthy societies would be in place in South Africa. And it is those
Emira,
hopes that are being dashed.
Isn't regime change part of the reason that we have this economic system that's not really working for the majority of the people, with so many of these issues linked to political instability and corruption? Perhaps a regime change of the ANC is what's needed.
Well, that's a part. Thinking about the leadership at the top is a part, but it's a structural change that's needed. It's a change in the economy. Some say it is a very sort of capitalist economy that is meeting only the interests of a narrow elite 1% in South Africa and elsewhere around the world. That has to change. So it's changing the status quo, creating opportunities where workers who are the backbone of the South African society, the miners, the workers that give of themselves without any proper compensance for their work. It is in their interest that an economy must advance. And so I think unless there is attention to changing the status quo, there will continue to be problems where increased unemployment, increased inequality, these unfortunate conditions will remain true to form.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Emira Woods, Associate Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington.